Welcome back, guys. Kevin Daniels joins us again. Welcome back, Kevin.
Welcome back. Thank you so much, Ben. Thanks for having me. Interesting choice of fade-in music for me.
Yeah? Why? Well, I heard you had a Scooby-Doo impression.
No.
Okay. We tried.
Yeah.
We tried.
You got it in the off time there.
Yeah. Well, Kevin Daniels joins us from Northwest Resume. He's recently appeared on Cairo 7 TV's Seattle's Better Northwest program, has spoken at many colleges, national conventions, as well as other events, and has been the top choice of executives at Microsoft, Amazon.com, Starbucks, and Boeing. And, Kevin, we've talked about resumes, and I am such a proponent of, with resumes and interviews. This is like one of the biggest things you'll ever create, the biggest marketing piece for yourself. And then people just think, I'll just write my resume, and I'll look at a book, and I'll figure out how to do it.
True.
Big mistake, right? And people need to quit doing that.
I think so.
Don't do anything yourself.
That seems to be the theme. Yeah, I mean, it just, and I think also similarly, I think that what you were alluding to earlier, when you're always going for the lowest price, the old adage, you get what you pay for, a lot of times comes into play. And we're going to talk about that later collectively, but I do have a lot of folks who decide not to go with our company, who go to the cheapest one, and then they come back a week later. It happens all the time.
I'm sure.
It really does. But in terms of wanted to talk too about interview coaching because sorry about that.
Nobody saw it's radio.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but you are filming it.
That's
but anyway,
true.
I've spent a lot of time on here talking about resumes and techniques for writing resumes, but I also wanted to talk about, we do interview coaching too. So interviewing I thought would be a good topic as well.
I like that because it's that second tier.
Yeah. It's the, ultimately, what I always say is it's not really our job to get you the job. We get you in front of somebody. We help you, give you a better chance to get in front of somebody. But once you get in front of somebody, then that's when people really start to freak out because they start thinking, oh my God, they're going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to. What am I going to do? And so actually Heather was kind enough to send me a rather humorous article the other day. I think it was on MSN.com. And it's actually just kind of a listing of some fairly embarrassing mistakes that folks have made in interviews in the past. And so I wanted to just kind of run, just for our own humor, run through a few of those and then sort of segue into, okay, what are some of the more common things that the mistakes that, or the pitfalls people tend to fall into more
Let's hear
commonly.
Some funny stories, Kevin.
Okay, candidate brought a how-to interview book with him to the interview.
At least he's showing he's willing to try to prepare.
Right. I actually don't think that's the worst one. It's not even close to the worst one on this list. I actually recommend highly buying a book on how to interview because you should do all the preparation work you can possibly do.
And reading.
Right.
And reading, not just buying the book.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. There you go. And of course, as we've talked about ad infinitum, researching the company as much as you possibly can before going in. Another one was, the candidate put the interviewer on hold during a phone interview. When she came back on the line, told the interviewer that she was excited because she had a big date set up for Friday. So,
it's all leave the personal business at the door, right?
Right. Yeah. That would fall under like, okay, I can't believe anybody would do that, common sense type of thing. But also it speaks to the theme of, keep it to the topic of the professional stuff. You're talking about the job here. You're not talking about your personal life. And that's a theme you should carry through in all of your answers, actually. Even when someone seems to be asking you about something personal, you want to, like, for instance, if they ask you, tell us a little bit about your personality, you want to talk about how your personality shows up at the workplace or how it has shown up at the workplace and helped you be successful in the past. So that would be a good example. Candidate wore a Boy Scout uniform and never told the interviewer why. That was another one. I don't even know what to say about that one.
That sounds like
maybe it was like was it near Halloween time?
I can see if it's a marketing job.
Yeah,
like look, you're gonna remember me. I'm doing my job, and that might work, right?
That's true. They probably aren't going to forget that person. I would say. This is one of my personal favorites. Candidate talked about promptness as one of her strengths after showing up 10 minutes late to the interview.
If you're late, should you just not go?
Yeah. Or should you just not maybe use that as a prime selling point for yourself, that you're always on time. You're always on time, except for 40 minutes ago when I showed up 10 minutes late. Exactly. This is a good one too. On the way to the interview, candidate passed, cut off, and flipped the middle finger to a driver who happened to be the interviewer. That's a good one. Candidate referred to himself in the third person. Reminds me of the Seinfeld episode, George Likes Spicy Chicken, right? Candidate took off his shoes during the interview. Candidate asked for a sip of the interviewer's coffee. That's a good one. And a mature candidate told the interviewer she wasn't sure if the job offered, of what the job offered was worth starting the car for. So those are some kind of offbeat examples. One of the, there's a number of common mistakes that folks made in the interviewing process. And I wanted to kind of go over those as well and just see if anybody out there has done these things. These are pretty common. And there's a percentage given next to it, which I assume is like, this is the frequency with which this happens. Answering cell phone or texting during the interview, 77%, it says.
Wow. Which
is just amazing to me. Appearing disinterested, 75%. That's just something you just got to be leery. You just got to try to be aware of that. Even if the person has been talking for 7 minutes and just bored the heck out of you, trying to at least appear interested, maybe ask a question or two, rather than just dressing inappropriately. That's 72%. Now, that's an interesting one, too. And I actually get a lot of folks who I do interview and coaching with ask me this. It kind of does, it varies in a way from place to place. If it's a company with a hip sort of youthful culture, the temptation, and you're aware of this fact, the temptation might be to show up in jeans and and not a dress shirt,
Sure.
But really,
to look like you already work there.
The rule of thumb, though, and that might make common sense, but really it's better to always, it's kind of like the concept of dressing for the job that you want type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's always better actually just to be as formal as you can be without being too formal, because that shows a little more respect for the interview itself if you show up in at least a nice dress shirt.
So if you're going to,
nice
say, a tech
slacks.
company, maybe a suit, no tie. But if you rock the tie, all of a sudden it's like
it's almost like
nobody's
you're trying
walking here for a tie with a tie on for 5 years.
Exactly. So it's almost like you're trying too hard, and so it's like and I hate to even mention things like this because these are the kinds of things that people go, oh my God, you got to be kidding me! I got to worry about that to that degree as well. But it's just the way the job market is right now. There are so many more candidates for jobs today than there were, it's a tight job market. There's tons of candidates looking for jobs than there were 7, 8 years ago, obviously, or even sooner than that, more recently than that. You have to really try to do everything you possibly can to give yourself an edge. And if you're appearing that you're trying too hard or whatever, or overdressing, you want to dress kind of like business casual, no matter where you're interviewing. And if you do that, you're probably going to be okay. And that,
unless you're going to be like an attorney. I mean, there's, I guess, and in Seattle,
right?
There's not a lot of coat and tie places anymore.
Exactly. But again, like not falling into the trap of I've got to seem like I'm cool or I'm hip and then dressing too much of a casual manner, like showing up in like a graphic T-shirt or something.
I've always heard you want to dress like one level above maybe what most other people are, right? It's kind of like you don't want to be the schlocky guy in the meeting.
Sure. So that's just something to think about as well. Appearing arrogant, 72%. I mean, and that's a tough one too, because that you're in there to sell yourself. But at the same time, you're selling yourself in the most selfless way that you possibly can, which is almost a contradiction. But
so not speaking in third person.
Well, Kevin's a heck of a guy. Yeah, no, you definitely don't want to. You definitely don't want to do that. But yeah, and that kind of speaks to the point of how do you sell yourself without appearing to be too arrogant? Depending on the question might be setting you up to talk about yourself, and that's okay. You are telling stories about what you've done in the past at work. That's what the interview is supposed to be about. But you can talk about those stories within the context of how you helped that company be better or how you helped them solve a problem that they were facing, as opposed to, isn't that great that I did X, Y, and Z? That's how I got that promotion that I wanted to, whatever. And that's how I'm in this position I am today, and I can't wait to be promoted here. I'm really ambitious type of thing. And so all of a sudden you're talking about too much about career progression for yourself, and all of a sudden you're not really talking about what they really care about, which is how is this guy going to help us? How is this gal going to help us be a better company? So just those things just kind of reminded me of those points.
Kevin, we just have a couple minutes left before we have to go to break. So when somebody's going to interview, they're going to go in there. What are some big key factors? I mean, those are the mistakes, but what are some things people can do right?
One thing that you can do right is, I think it.
I mean, how do you shine? How do you look good?
A lot of it, Ben, has to do with how you prepare. I mean, most people, their strategy for a job interview is hope. That's their strategy. They hope they don't get that question that they can't answer. And that's, hope isn't a strategy.
Unless you're running for president.
Right, exactly. But what you want to do is actually do the work to prepare for that interview, right? And what that entails is writing out actual stories of your work history. Okay. So I haven't had time yet to talk about behavioral questions, right? Which are the kind of questions you tend to get these days in interviews, but they all have to do with telling a story about some problem that you encountered, what you did to solve that problem, and then the result of whatever that was. Writing out by hand as many of examples of work stories the night before the interview that you can kind of gets those work stories into your subconscious. And it allows you during that interview to sort of pull them out of nowhere because they're going to be asking you for specific examples. And if you're stammering and saying, can we come back to that question, you're just not going to appear as professional. So that kind of preparation, and then also preparing for the company, for the, knowing as much as you can about that company before you go in so that you might be able to talk about yourself within the context of how you're going to help them solve the problems that they're facing.
Well, I mean, I would even just paralleling yourself with the vision of the company or what maybe that job is, I would think.
Right. Exactly.
And you can't do it without preparing.
Exactly.
Do you, we have to go to break, Kevin. We're here with Kevin Daniels, owner of Northwest Resumes. Do you think people don't prepare because they don't know how, or they just have never done it? Or, I mean, why don't people prepare?
I think that some people, I think it's kind of the same reason why people don't get professional help on a resume. It's because they don't even know that it's out there. They don't even know that there's a resource for it. Some people I think they almost think it's square in a way to prepare for an interview. They think I'm going to go in there and I will appear more off the cuff if I just go in there and answer the questions. I've been on 100 interviews. I know the kinds of questions they're going to ask. I'm ready because I've done interviews before. That's totally not the way to go. Even if you have done a million interviews before, it always helps to prepare the day or the night before.
I would imagine you could go as deep as going online and even figuring out what typical questions are from certain companies.
All you do is Google behavioral job interview questions, and you'll get about 1,000 examples of these behavioral type questions that are going to be probably about 70% of the questions that they'll ask in the interview. It's give us an example of a time when you had to do ...
Yeah, well, if you know somebody who's looking for a job and, needs that help, needs that extra push, Kevin is certainly a great resource. He's been well-renowned throughout the Seattle area. And, thanks so much for joining us again. You'll join us again here in just a minute. Thanks. Heather Moore's going to join us. She's been preparing a question like people prepare for interviews. She's going to ask us the questions like interviewers might ask you. We'll be right back after this break. That's Kevin Daniels from Northwest Resumes. You're listening to Brashenomics.